Welcome in. It's Thursday, January 5th, and we're back with our weekly NFL coverage. And boy, is today going to be a good one. It's the last week of the NFL regular season, week 18. It's win or go home for some teams with the playoffs starting next week, which is crazy, I will say, but I am ready. Without a shadow of a doubt, I'm ready. But we're going to start by looking at the updated playoff standings. Then we're going to dive into all the matchups this week. We're going to make our picks. And then I have a big announcement at the end of the show for you guys. So stay tuned for that. This is your early reminder to drop a like on the podcast. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, as we're closing in on our first milestone of 50 subscribers. Shout out to you guys. And turn those post notifications on, man, because we have some big news coming up, especially at the end of the show. And next week, we have some big news coming up. But without further ado, welcome to the Anomaly Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Stiftar. Let's see what Week 18 has to offer. Alright, let's dive into the updated playoff standings first. We're going to start in the AFC side of things, and then we'll move over to the NFC as we always do. As you see, the number one seed is the Kansas City Chiefs, who jumped up a spot last week with the postponement of the Buffalo Bengals game, and they're going to take full advantage of that, unfortunately. But the Chiefs, they're the number one seed. They should win this week, and they'll have home field. The number two seed is the Buffalo Bills, dropping down a spot even after not losing. It was just the postponement of the game. The number three seed is the Cincinnati Bengals, same case, but they're staying where they're at. No shocker here through the first three. The fourth spot is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're playing for their playoff lives this week against the Tennessee Titans, who you see is in the hunt. Whoever wins that game will be taking on the Chargers next week. Speaking of the Chargers, they're the number five seed. They've looked red hot, one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. Not a lot of teams want to play them. The number six seed is the Ravens, who should have Lamar Jackson back this week against the Bengals, coincidentally enough. But that'll be fun. We'll talk about that later. And the seventh seed for now is the New England Patriots, who play Buffalo this week. So it'll be interesting to see if New England can stay in if they beat Buffalo, or if a Miami Dolphins, a Pittsburgh Steelers, or a Tennessee Titans, all three of those teams are still in the playoff hunt. But for the seventh seed, it'll either be the Patriots, the Dolphins, or the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen for each team, but those are your scenarios for the AFC side of things. Moving over to the NFC, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. No shocker here. They've dropped two straight though, and they are 13-3 as we talk. But right now they have the number one seed. They should have Jalen Hurts back at least for the first half of the game, and they should maintain this number one seed. In the number two seed, we have the San Francisco 49ers, who have won 9 straight games. They jumped up from the 3 seed to the 2 seed in this past week, overlapping the Minnesota Vikings. But they've looked red hot. Doesn't matter which quarterback is there. They've been dominant. They deserve the number 2 seed. Possibly they could get the number 1 seed if they win and Philly loses, but I doubt that happens. The number 3 seed is the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, they've been on a bit of a slip here too, but we know the talent they have on both sides of the ball. We know how dominant they can be. They just need to put everything together and stop making so many mistakes. The number 4 seed is the Tampa Bay Bucks. I was going to say the Milwaukee Bucks, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady. They're getting hot at the right time. Tom Brady wants to play this week. We'll get into that later, but there's no reason Tampa Bay will be your number 4 seed next week. The 5 seed is the Cowboys, who still have a shot at the number 1 seed. If the Cowboys were to win and the Eagles were to lose, I believe the Dallas Cowboys, due to tiebreakers, would get the number 1 seed in the NFC. We'll have to see how that plays out. But the number 6 seed is the Giants. They're locked in here at number 6. They will not move up, down, left or right. The Giants are here at number 6. The 7th seed is the Seattle Seahawks. I'm hoping they get in. They're a very fun team. They should have Tyler Lockett back next week. But to my understanding, this is how it's broken down. Seattle, even if they win, right, they need Detroit to beat the Green Bay Packers. If the Green Bay Packers beat Detroit, Green Bay is in because they have more conference wins than the Seattle Seahawks. Conference wins are just wins over NFC opponents because these teams are all in the NFC. So if the Packers win, they're in the playoffs. If Detroit wins and Seattle loses, Detroit is in the playoffs. And if Seattle wins and Detroit wins, Seattle is in the playoffs. Very confusing, but that is your basic rundown of the updated playoff standings. Like I said, man, playoffs start next week, so I'm very, very excited for that. But I guess it's time to dive into our final 16-game slate of the season. Like I said, man, I've said it twice now. I still cannot believe that playoffs start next week. The most exciting time of the year, man. That's when the best football is played. But I mean, when I was going through my prep for this today's show, I was thinking to myself, how do you make picks for Week 18 of the NFL regular season? In some ways, it's tougher than Week 1. Because some teams have everything to play for, ranging from home field advantage to a divisional title or a wild card spot. Others have the option of resting their starters, and it makes for a messy week of trying to predict these things from happening. And it's a messy week of picks, especially when those decisions can be made 2 minutes before the game, right? And I'm recording this on Thursday. Obviously, games aren't played until Saturday, which is where we start out here with 2 Saturday games. This one starts at 4:30 Eastern Time, and the last one obviously at 8. But the first Saturday game, we have the 13-3 number 1 seed Kansas City Chiefs going into Las Vegas to take on the 6-10 Las Vegas Raiders. With a win here, the Chiefs can earn the number 1 spot. They can clinch the number 1 seed in the AFC for the third time in the last 5 years. So they've been dominant. They're on a 4-game winning streak. They won the first meeting between these two teams 30-29 in Kansas City. I believe it was week 4 or 5. Don't quote me on that. But the Raiders, they were officially eliminated from playoff contention last week, even though they nearly played spoiler against the 49ers with Jarrett Stidham under center, not Derek Carr. Speaking of Derek Carr, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him this offseason. I know he will have suitors. Teams like the New York Jets or teams like the Giants or, there's a bunch of teams out there that could take a shot at Derek Carr, but we'll obviously have to wait to see how that plays out. But for this matchup, the Raiders, they have nothing to play for, really, besides pride. And while Kyle, I can't talk right now, but stick with me. Basically, what I'm saying is the Raiders have nothing to play for. Kansas City has everything to play for. Give me Kansas City to clinch the 1 seed for the third time in the last 5 years. Next Saturday game, we have possibly the game of the week, at least from implications standpoint, right? But the Jaguars, they beat the Titans 36-22 in Week 13 just about a month ago, and that game started a 4-game winning streak for this Jaguars team. The winner of this matchup, like I said, it takes the AFC South, and whoever wins the division will get the playoff spot, right? And Tennessee coach Mike Vrabel, he has to choose between the quarterbacks Joshua Dobbs and Malik Willis. I believe Joshua Dobbs will get the start here. He will be the better bet. And he's going to have to be on point, against the Jacksonville run defense. That's only averaged about 70 to 75 yards a game, right? So basically what I'm saying there is Joshua Dobbs, he's going to have to be on point passing the football down the field because Jacksonville does have an okay run defense, right, at times. And even though Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry, the question is, he's coming off an injury. Can Tennessee get it done through the air, right? But I still think Jacksonville, even if Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry and he comes out and he rushes for 200 yards, I want to see Jacksonville in the playoffs. Selfishly, I feel like they'll be a very fun team to watch in the playoffs. And I believe they get it done here. They're just too much for the Titans. Their quarterback play is not up to par with a Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And like I said, they should be a very fun team in the playoffs. Give me Jacksonville. Moving on to Sunday football, we have the 2-13-1 Houston Texans battling it out here with the 4-11-1 Indianapolis Colts. The biggest question here is right now the Houston Texans would have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft in next April. So if a win here, saying that they tied this Colts team in Week 1, a win here would jeopardize that. Houston would not have the 1 seed anymore. And obviously they don't want that, right? They want to have the number 1 pick. They want their choice at who they want to change their franchise, potentially, right? I'm just curious to see how non-obvious they're going to make this, that they want to lose this game, right? Not that the Colts are this great team, but Houston needs this number one pick. Do they just go and start Jeff Driscoll all game, right, at quarterback? or did they just make stupid mistakes on purpose, I guess, to make it look like, they didn't try and lose the game, right? But for Indianapolis, their nightmare season ends here, but their interim head coach, Jeff Saturday, he at least can go out with a victory. I'm gonna say the Colts win this game for Jeff Saturday's sake. Give me them to win at home, and a very ugly game. Deion Jackson probably, this would be a Deion Jackson type game, right? Especially ending the season off. But give me the Colts to win here, ugly at home. Houston wins. They get to keep the number one seed. Indy wins. Jeff Saturday goes out with a win. Next up, we have an AFC North matchup here. We have the 10-6 Baltimore Ravens, who currently are the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs, going up against the 11-4 Cincinnati Bengals, which this would be a playoff matchup if the playoffs started Sunday. But the biggest question for this game is, will Lamar Jackson return? And how much rust will he show if that is the case, right? Baltimore won the first meeting between these teams early in the year, 19-17, but the Bengals, since that point, have arguably been the best team in the AFC throughout the second half of the season especially. And even though the Ravens have allowed only 12 points a game on average in the last 5 games, even without their starting quarterback Lamar Jackson, how is that going to translate against a high-powered, fiery offense like the Cincinnati Bengals? I can't imagine very well, right? The Bengals, very, very rarely do you see them play a game like they did against the Browns on Halloween, where they only scored 13 points. This Bengals team is at least going to put up 20 plus any given Sunday. 12, I will say though, it would be very impressive if this Ravens defense came out, held this team to under 20 points, and won the game. I think we would look at this Ravens team a little bit different going into next week. But if they just don't want to count that Bengals and Bills game, I'll say this. If you haven't been keeping up with the news, obviously the injury to Damar Hamlin, prayers up to him and his family. I believe he's doing better as we speak. But due to that injury and the game being postponed, the Bengals and Bills are going to have one less game on their record compared to everybody else in the NFL this season. So that's why Buffalo dropped from the number 1 seed to the number 2 seed in the AFC. And the NFL is just going to go off of win percentage, right? So, basically, the Bengals, I don't believe, can go up or down here. I do expect Cincy to probably rest some starters right here, because they have no shot of losing the AFC. Oh, take that back. I take that back. I apologize. The Bengals, let me put it this way for you guys, because I just thought about it. If Baltimore wins this game, they would sweep the season series with Cincy. The Baltimore Ravens would win this game, and they would win the AFC North and take the number 3 seed from the Cincinnati Bengals. So this game is actually a very big game if the Ravens were to win, right? Obviously, the Bengals, they have a lot less to play for than the Baltimore Ravens. Will that play a factor? Will Baltimore come out more motivated with a Lamar Jackson return? I don't know. In my opinion, if Cincy plays their stars this week, they win. If they don't, give me Lamar Jackson in a return and this Ravens team to look relatively scary going into the playoff picture. Next up, we have an AFC North matchup as well. We have the 7-9 Cleveland Browns going into Pittsburgh to take on the 8-8 Steelers. Playoffs or not, this game's going to be fun. I really believe so. Mike Tomlin, yet again, he's doing his magic. He can still sneak the Steelers team into the playoffs just like they did last year. And Kenny Pickett, last week he saved the season against Baltimore. He looked great at times. And, hey, the Browns have a chance to play spoiler with Deshaun Watson for the second straight week. They did last week against the Commanders. They can this week against the Steelers, right? But, I don't believe the Browns would probably come out with as much motivation as the Steelers, right? Because the Steelers are playing for a playoff spot. Browns are just looking to keep the Steelers out of the playoffs, if that makes any sense. If the Browns win here, they can sweep the season series. Would be the first time they've done that since 1988. Even if the Steelers can't get in the playoffs, because they would need to win here and they would need New England to lose. This game's going to be heated. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a divisional matchup. That AFC North, tough, gritty matchup that we've always known and put two and two together with the Steelers and the Browns, right? Every time they match up, it's fun to watch, no matter how bad the Browns are. But with all that being said, I have tons of respect for Mike Tomlin. At times, I wish he was the Browns coach. He's a player's coach, but he knows how to win football games with no matter what he has. He's honestly very disrespected as a head coach. But you know what we do on this channel. Even though I think the Steelers would probably come out, this would be a Steelers game to win. Give me Deshaun Watson and the Browns to play spoiler yet again. Give the Browns fans false hope going into next season. And, I do kind of hope the Steelers win so the Browns are forced to make changes. But if the Browns, even if the Browns win here and we don't make changes, we might as well just trade everybody because we're not serious. We're not playing serious. But next up, we have an NFC North matchup between the Minnesota Vikings at 12-4. They're the third seed in your NFC standings, and they're going into Soldier Field to take on the 3-13 Chicago Bears. The Minnesota Vikings, they're coming off of a blowout loss against the Packers last week, where it was very ugly. I believe Justin Jefferson only had a catch for 15 yards, so Jair Alexander, cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, he backed up his smack talk, saying that Week 1 performance from Justin Jefferson was a fluke, right? And he backed it up, and this Packers defense has been red hot, to say the least. But now with that loss last week, the Minnesota Vikings, they're pretty much out of any movement. They can't really move, right? Unless they think that the 49ers would lose to the Arizona Cardinals and they could win. They're not going to go up to the number 2 seed. They have no shot at the number 1 seed. They can't drop down to the 4 seed because Tampa's terrible. So there's no movement here. So with that being said that they're going to stay at the number 3 seed in the NFC, rest your guys like Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, your key players on defense. Those guys are going to rest here in this game. Will they still have enough to beat a Bears team that has lost 9 straight games? But, I'm going to say that if Minnesota, if Kirk Cousins and company, if they start and they play at least the first half of this game, I do say they come out and they blow this Bears team out and they win this game to get that Packers loss out of their memory, right? But if they sit, as crazy as it sounds, I still just think that this Bears defense is so bad to the point where the Minnesota's probably going to come out with a win. And for the Bears, all I have is this: get Justin Fields some help. That's all I got. Get him some help and spend that $100+ million you have for next season. Next up, we have an AFC East matchup between the 8-8 New England Patriots with their playoff lives on the line, going into Buffalo to take on the 12-3 Bills. Now the Patriots, they still have a playoff shot, as we talked earlier, and their path is fairly simple. It's win and get in. A win could seal the final spot in the AFC for New England over Miami, over Pittsburgh, but who knows? if they win this game and and Kansas City wins, we would get a wild card rematch from last season where Buffalo blew the doors off of New England. But for Buffalo, the postponement of last week's game will screw them when it comes to seeding, as unfortunate as it does sound. And even as a win here, like I said, a win here doesn't get them the 1 seed unless Kansas City were to lose Saturday, right? Good news for this matchup, though. The Buffalo Bills, they've taken control of this rivalry, and they've won 5 of the last 6 meetings against the New England Patriots, including some playoff wins there. Hey, can they knock off this Belichick-led Patriots team for the 6th time in 7 matchups, right? Which I think is very likely, especially because the Bills are going to have something to play for. Give me the Buffalo Bills to shock the world, not shock the world, but take care of business. I'm sorry if the audio was a little bit low there, but hey, we're back. Next up, we have an AFC East matchup between the 7-9 New York Jets and the 8-8 Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, they still have a shot at the AFC wildcard spot, the number 7 seed, but they're on a 5-game losing streak. Their quarterback, their star quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, he's out for this week as well. So it's on the veteran shoulders of Teddy Bridgewater to get them to that playoff spot, right? The Jets are also on a 5-game losing streak, and they've lost their last 4 road games. So this game isn't the most appealing on paper, right? But I will say that it looks like the Jets are in a better spot to win this one. But something tells me that the talent of Miami, like the Tyreek Hill and the Jalen Waddles of the world, they're going to pull this one out for Miami, and they're going to give them hope, right? But in my opinion, saying that Buffalo is going to have something to play for and saying that Miami just has the talent, if Miami wins and New England loses, Miami gets in. I believe that's what happens, but in a close one here, maybe in like a 2-point game or a 3-point game, Miami grabs that number 7 seed. Maybe we'll see Tua next week, but obviously health over a meaningless playoff game. Next up, we have an NFC South matchup between the 8-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are the number 4 seed in the NFC. They're going into Atlanta to take on the 6-10 Atlanta Falcons. This is another one where the starters might sit. Tom Brady last week, he led the Buccaneers to an NFC South title. It was a crazy performance by Tom Brady himself and Mike Evans, who had like 10 catches for 200 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. Mike Evans had an amazing day, right? But Brady came out in the post-game presser and he said that he wants to play Week 18. He wanted to play this matchup against the Falcons, and maybe Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Bucks, lets him play that half or the first half. But I mean, for those that don't know why I'm questioning the GOAT, right, is because he's a 7-time Super Bowl champion. He's 40 plus years old. He's been in this league for over 20 years. I believe that there was a stat that came out that said he's been in the NFL longer than he has. He's been in the NFL longer in his life, longer than he was without football, right? So he's been in the NFL for a longer stretch than he has without, if that makes any sense. I know there's a better way to word that, but basically he's been in the NFL for more than half his life. But for this, for this game, I just don't understand why Tom Brady would play, even if this team can't move up or down in the playoff picture. Don't want to risk injury. Don't want to do anything stupid. This Bucs team is already not as dominant as they used to be. Get healthy. Get ready for next week. But what do I know? He's a 7-time Super Bowl champion. I am a analyst, right? But for Atlanta, this is another great week for Desmond Ridder to get more reps under his belt. He could be a potential franchise guy for them, and a game like this, especially against a veteran defense like the Bucs, I believe it's going to be a very good game for Desmond Ridder. He's going to show some flashes here, and who knows? I mean, Desmond Ridder might be playing for his starting career for next year in this game, because Atlanta's not a contender by any stretch of the imagination, right? So maybe Desmond Ridder's playing for his future starting spot in this game against Tampa. I believe he plays okay, but give me Tampa at home or on the road to win this game, right? Or I might go back on that. I might go back on that pick. We'll do that later when we go through our picks of the week. I might pick Atlanta there. But for Carolina and New Orleans, we have an NFC South matchup here. And this one's just highlighted by, it's just a battle of draft position, right? The Saints have won the last 3 meetings against this Panthers team the last 3 years, or over the last season and a half, sorry. But despite the ups and downs of the season, New Orleans is oddly, they have a pretty good home record. They're 4-3 at home, which is better than you would think. And for Carolina, their interim head coach, Steve Wilks, he's made a great case to get the full-time position this offseason. And a win here, I believe, would do it. But a loss here, obviously, wouldn't help him too much. The only problem for Carolina is that they're 1-6 on the road this season. Can Steve Wilks overcome that and grab the starting position for next season? Obviously, that question's still in the air. But I believe that Steve Wilks, I hope that he can get the job done. I believe they get it done here on the road to take down the New Orleans. Next up, we move on to the 4 o'clock games where we have the 4-12 Arizona Cardinals going into San Francisco and going into the Bay to take on the 12-4 red hot San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers, they've won 9 straight games. Brock Purdy, since he's taken over the starting position, he hasn't lost a game yet. And for my new Ohio bettors, San Francisco, they're 7-2 in that stretch against the spread, right? So the 49ers, they arguably are the best team in football. They're the best oiled machine in football. And saying that this is week 18 and they have the number 2 seed locked up, they might pull back and sit their starters if the Eagles do win earlier in the day. But the Arizona Cardinals, they're, even if San Fran plays their guys or not, it's not going to make a difference in this game. San Fran's won 10 in a row. I believe if Brock Purdy doesn't play Josh Johnson, the well-traveled veteran, he will get the start here for San Francisco. But San Francisco, they're gearing up for a deep run in the NFC playoffs. Arizona, I mean, they already have their eyes set on next season and the health of Kyler Murray. Give me San Francisco here at home. No surprise there. Next up, we have an NFC East matchup as we have the 12-4 Dallas Cowboys going into Washington to take on the miserable 7-8-1 Washington Commanders. Shout out to Chances if you're listening. This is his team, and he was heartbroken last week seeing Carson Wentz literally chuck the ball anywhere, right? But the Commanders, they were knocked out of the playoff race last week, and this week they catch a Cowboys team that still has a chance at home field advantage, right? Dallas has won the last 3 meetings against Washington. Dak Prescott completes more than 70% of his passage each of the last 3 games he's played Washington. So he loves to play Washington. He's just been a bit sloppy the last couple weeks for Dallas. He needs to clean up the picks. Speaking of picks, Carson Wentz must be in the conversation when we say that. But he's got to be better than throwing 3 interceptions like he did last week for Washington. He really killed their playoff shot. And for a Carson Wentz fan, he let me down, right? Even though he's playing my Browns and I wanted the Browns to win. But Dallas, regardless of if it's Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, I believe Wentz is getting the job. Dallas is too much. Dallas wins, and they're gonna pray all day until Sunday that Philadelphia loses their game earlier in the day. Because if Philly loses, Dallas wins, Dallas Cowboys will be your number 1 seed in the NFC, unfortunately. Right? But next up, we have an NFC West matchup between the 5-11 Los Angeles Rams and the 8-8 Seattle Seahawks. For the Rams, Baker Mayfield, in his time there, he's shown flashes, but his 2 road starts haven't been haven't been great at all. Right? He only averages about 121 yards a game passing, and those are without both of his road starts. This for him is a very pivotal game, though. I believe. I believe that if he comes out this game and he just plays mediocre, this Rams team loses big, he's going to be a career backup, right? Or, he might be like a Geno Smith where he gets another shot down the road. But a win here and a good performance from Baker Mayfield, it might land him a starting position next year, believe it or not. Weirder things have happened, but a team like Washington doesn't have a quarterback. They're going to be in the middle of the lottery. A guy like a Baker Mayfield could step in and be the quarterback for their future. For the Seahawks, this is a weird position for them. They need a win first, and they got to hope that the Lions maybe pull off an upset on the road against the Packers. I believe the Seahawks, they do their part. They pull off their win, and if the Lions can somehow pull off an upset against the Packers, maybe, just maybe, the Seahawks team can get Tyler Lockett back next week from that broken finger, and they can kind of be a scary playoff team. Do I think they beat San Fran? No. Okay, I'll say that now. I don't believe they beat San Fran or Minnesota, but they'll be a fun playoff team, to say the least, right? For Seattle, though, they're big Lions fans this weekend. Next up, we have an NFC East matchup between the 9-6-1 Giants and the 13-3 number 1 seed Philadelphia Eagles. This game's going to be ugly. I know it sounds weird because you see teams with those records, and you think it's going to be a good game, but it's a 1 o'clock game for a reason. For the Giants, they clinched a playoff spot already. It was the first time since 2016, so shout out to the Giants. But for this matchup, they're stuck at the number 6 seed. They have no movement whatsoever if they win, lose, or tie. So they're going to rest their guys, right? They're going to rest their guys. That's just what makes sense. Get your guys ready for the playoffs, as they're going to be on the road every week. Might as well get your guys ready, right? But for Philly, they've lost 2 straight. A large part of that is because of their star quarterback, Jalen Hurts. He's been out with an injury. and Gardner Minshew's been in the mix. Gardner Minshew's actually played decent, but they've lost 2 games, right? And the number 1 seed is now up in the air. It'll be interesting to see if Jalen Hurts does suit up and play at least the first half in this game. Obviously they don't want to rush him back from injury going into the playoffs, right? But you got to think they want to at least get him in the first half of this game to get some to play again, right before they go into a divisional matchup in 2 weeks. But they need to win this game to get the number 1 seed, give their quarterback another week of rest going into a deep playoff run. But if he doesn't play and Gardner steps in, Gardner against a starterless New York Giants team, I believe Gardner can get that done, and Eagles get the 1 seed no matter what. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Chargers going into Denver to take on, they're 4-12. The Chargers, they're coming into this one with little room for improvement in their seeding. Obviously, it's Week 18. There's not going to be a ton of movement. Usually, it's just the 7th seed that we're usually arguing about at Week 18. But I will say, I would rather play the Jags over the Bengals, obviously. So maybe that's all the motivation that the Chargers need in this game to play their guys. And even though that they have little room for movement, if they can stay at the 5 seed, right, and not slip down to the 6 seed, that would be big for this Chargers team. They get to play an inexperienced Jacksonville Jaguars team over that Bengals team that went to the Super Bowl last year, right? So Chargers, it's all about who do you want to play next round. It's got to be the Jags, right? But for the Broncos, their miserable season can finally end. They're just like the Colts. They already have their eyes set on the offseason, for a new regiment to come in, and hopefully this Broncos team can get a much-needed reset for their star quarterback, Russell Wilson. Hopefully next year he could play like we all know he can play. But for this matchup, they could set their division foe in a difficult spot for Denver. They can make the Chargers' lives very difficult going into the playoffs. If they can defeat the Chargers, they don't take them out the playoffs, but they can get them to go up against a Bengals team, which nobody wants to play right now, right? Nobody wants to play the Bengals in the AFC. Nobody wants to play the San Francisco 49ers. So for that reason alone, I don't believe if the Chargers rest their starters, right? If they come out with some backups, give me Denver at home, But if they don't, if they play their guys, obviously give me the Chargers. The last matchup of the week is Sunday Night Football. Obviously, for a reason, we have the 8-8 Detroit Lions playing the 8-8 Green Bay Packers. This game, it's fairly simple. It's win or go home. Without a shadow of a doubt, this is the game of the week. For Detroit, obviously, they've been the Cinderella team of this season. At one point in the year, they were 1-6. Now they're in contention for a playoff spot. This would be the ultimate comeback story for a Dan Campbell that at one point in the season, we all knew was going to get fired one way or another, right, at the end of the year. But he has his team in a playoff spot. He's saved himself another season. But it would be a miracle run if they were to win this game and get some help from Seattle losing to make that playoff spot, right? But for the Packers, they've had a 5-game losing streak earlier in the season as well. Same with Detroit, and that included a loss to Detroit. But the Packers, they're clicking at the right time. You can never count the veteran and the Hall of Famer out of Aaron Rodgers. He's doing it yet again. And but the Packers, they're sticking to their strengths like we thought that they would all season, and that would be running the ball with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, right? Obviously, they have one of the best backfields in the league. We thought they would feed them more. We're seeing that now. But, hey, how many times have we seen Aaron Rodgers? How many times, despite whatever struggles are going on with the Packers, how many times have we seen Aaron Rodgers in a regular season be perseverant and pull out a win, pull something out of nowhere, right? and come out with a win. We've seen that a lot, right, from Aaron Rodgers in his decorated run in the league. But for this matchup, I really hope the Lions win. I really hope they win and they get some help from Seattle losing. But if I was betting, give me the Hall of Fame quarterback and Aaron Rodgers to win this game and meet the 49ers in the playoffs again, unfortunately. It seems like that is a one of those things that's guaranteed in life is to have a Packers and 49ers matchup in the playoffs. But the screen, what you'll see on your screen now is my picks of the week. As you see, I did change it. Give me Atlanta, actually, to take home that game against Tampa. because I do believe that Tom Brady and the veterans of the Buccaneers will sit. So give me Atlanta at home to take that one. And then I'll have Buffalo beating New England, Minnesota beating Chicago. This Cincy game I wanted to highlight because if Cincy plays their guys against Baltimore, which I'm almost positive they will, give me Cincy at home. But if they were to say whatever, we don't care about seeding, and we're the Cincinnati Bengals, give me the Ravens on the road, right? But there we go. Right now I'm saying if Cincy plays their guys, give me Cincinnati. Then I'll read off the rest of my winners. We have Denver, Green Bay, Indy, Kansas City, Miami, Carolina, Philadelphia, Cleveland, San Francisco, Seattle, Dallas, and Jacksonville. Obviously, you see last week we had a great week. We were 12-3. We've been great the last month or so. We've really only had about 2 or 3 bad weeks. I believe we've only had 2 weeks under 500 this whole season. So we've had a really good season to go. We're getting about 62, 63% of the games right. So not where we want to be, but not too shabby, right? But before we get out of here, I do have a big announcement. Next Tuesday show, it'll be the 3rd ever fan-led episode. It is that time of the month. I told you guys when I started this podcast that about once a month I want to get you guys involved, right? I want to build a community, and I want to get you guys involved, right? I want you guys to feel like you're part of the show. So if you're new, though, I want to read off the rules. Obviously, we have some new subscribers since last month, but here's how it works, right? You're going to send any questions, hot takes, scenarios that you can think of, etc., right? Anything you can think of. You're going to send any of that. You can either put it in the comments below. You can send it to any of my socials that are listed on your screen in the intro and outro, which should be on your screen in a minute. You can send it to my Instagram, or if you have my personal number or whatever, you can send it there as well. So you can send it in the comments below, my socials, my number. However you get it to me, you can get it to me. It could be a question, hot take, scenario. I'm going to bring it to the show. But hey, these questions, they don't have to be sports related. I would prefer them to be, saying that it is a sports podcast, but it doesn't have to be sports related. Some of you guys don't know me personally, so if you want to get to know me, go ahead and shoot them questions over, right? You have until Sunday, this Sunday, to get your submissions in, because that's when I usually start my prep for the next week. And don't worry, I will bring every question to the show. Have some fun with it. I've always brought everything to the show, so don't feel like you're sending too much, too little, whatever. I'll make something out of it, right? But hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Next Thursday is the NFL playoffs, or next Thursday is our NFL playoff coverage for the wild card round. That'll be some fun. So stay tuned for that. But that's going to do it for today's show. Have a fun but safe weekend. Get those submissions in. Enjoy football. Good luck to your team this weekend, especially if they're playing for a playoff spot. Unless you're a Steelers fan. But until next Tuesday, we'll be back with a fan-led episode. I'm out. Enjoy your weekend.